Welcome to Learning to Glow, a show about wellness, skin health, and self-development. I'm your host, Jess. I'm a mom, entrepreneur, and skincare expert. I'm so excited to share tips on how to achieve healthy skin and bring amazing guests in the field of health, fitness, aging gracefully, and personal growth. Let's explore all different ways we can take care of ourselves as women, both inside and out, to truly shine. So let's get glowing. Hello, friends. I am a little sick today, a little under the weather. So if you have any great home remedies for boosting your immune system, send them my way. I'm definitely drinking a lot of ginger tea, and summer colds, aren't they fun? You know, I'm getting ready to go on a trip, so I'm definitely trying to rest as much as I can and feel better before I go because I want to feel good. I haven't been on a trip in quite a while. So if you have any good tips, send them to me. But today I'm really excited about our episode and our guest. She was incredible. Terry is a health and fitness coach who works with women over 40, and her story is so inspiring. She opens up about walking away from her high-stress corporate job, hitting rock bottom with her health, including being hospitalized twice, emotional eating, and how alcohol played a role in her health as well. These tough moments led her to completely transforming her life. We get into what helps her heal, the role of strength training and nutrition, and how doing the inner emotional work was the real game changer for her, and that is what she does and helps with her clients. Terry also talks about retreats that she leads at the House of Rose. They are experiences for women looking to reset and reconnect, and they sound absolutely incredible. So I will make sure to link all of her information in the show notes. Please go check her out. She is great. She shared so many helpful tips, and her story I know is so relatable. I know so many people will really enjoy this episode. If it spoke to you, if this episode spoke to you, please share it with a friend who might need to hear it too. Don't forget to hit subscribe and leave us a quick review. That always helps get the word out and find these amazing conversations. You can also connect with me and Terry on Instagram. I will leave the link in the show notes for Terry, and I'm at Simply Just Skincare. We'd love to hear from you, your thoughts on this episode, or just say hi and enjoy this one. It's fabulous. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Learning to Glow podcast. Today we have Terry Tateossian. Welcome to our show. I'm so glad that you're here with us today.
Thank you, Jess, for having me. It's my pleasure to be here.
Thank you. You're a health and fitness coach. You do a lot of different things that we'll get into, but if you could just tell us what you do, and then I'd love to hear a little bit more about your story, but if you could just introduce yourself and tell us what you do.
So my passion and my purpose in the last 5 years has been in coaching women over 40 in terms of their lifestyle, their fitness, strength training, nutrition, mindset, and just kind of collaborating with women to figure out what the right approach is for them. And so the other aspect of this is that I also do in-person retreats at the House of Rose. And there we do everything in person. And so, yeah, that's been my gig.
I really want to talk about your retreats, you know, a little bit later because I just actually got back from a retreat. They're so powerful, and a lot of women, especially in our 40s, are so busy. And I feel like I got to a place where I kind of took a step back from doing trips with the girls or taking time for myself. You just get swept up in it, and to like really take the time and set aside and do something in person is so impactful, and it makes such a huge difference to actually get off the computer and get in person and get out in nature. So I can't wait to talk about that. Before we do, can you tell us how you got into this industry? Like what made you so passionate about it? I know that you've been through a health journey of your own, so maybe you can share that with us.
So since about the age of 26, 27, I quit the corporate environment. I quit my corporate job and I became an entrepreneur. And in the process of doing that, I also had 2 children. So I was pregnant twice, gave birth twice. And if you can imagine, growing a business and a startup from nothing actually takes up a lot of time. It is almost like a baby. And so I found myself working 18-hour days and having children, a family, a home, friends, all of that. And so by the time I was 37 years old, burnout is probably an understatement of what I was experiencing. I unknowingly had hit perimenopause and I was 80 pounds overweight. And so, what resulted from that is two hospitalizations, pre-diabetes markers, anxiety. I had to go see cardiologists and all kinds of doctors at the age of 37. Now, being really thick headed and stubborn, the first hospitalization did not wake me up. Right. So why? Because I was just really thick headed. I thought this is just a fluke. I'm 37. This is ridiculous. And I don't have time for this. Right. Because I was running a business. It had 40 employees at the time, multiple contractors, multiple consultants. I was traveling like a maniac. And so I had no time. I was like, this thing, whatever it is, it's gotta go. It's gotta wait. And so I ended up back in the hospital a second time. So that thing was not waiting. It was really banging on the door pretty hard for me to pay attention, because not only was I not able to go up a flight of stairs, I was out of breath just walking around. I was just in really bad shape. I was abusing alcohol as well. I was addicted to sugar. I was eating emotionally. Just everything was just blowing up. Sirens were going off in my body, my mind, and I was ignoring it all. So it took two hospitalizations before I realized that my lifestyle was not conducive to a healthy aging process. And two, I had to make really drastic changes very quickly.
So after your second hospital visit, what happened next? Were you finally like, okay, I surrender, I need to make a change? And how did you start? Like, where did you begin?
So the second hospital visit really humbled me. Finally, it
Mm.
got through that this was not going to go away. This was going to continue. And so I reached out to a holistic doctor in my area in New Jersey. And I'll never forget this conversation. I talk about it all the time. I guess I didn't have a lot of respect for doctors in the medical industry, because I felt like you were just kind of like a farm number, like a farm animal going through the process. That nobody really listened. They didn't really take the time. That was my experience, and I had the same type of experience in my two pregnancies as well. So not a good perspective, right? And so I didn't have this feeling like if I went to a doctor, my problems were going to be solved. But regardless, I reached out to a holistic doctor, and it was the best experience I ever had, because I had never had a medical practitioner talk to me the way that she did. And the intake form was about 2 hours long. We had a 2 hour conversation about, I mean, my entire medical history, my parents' medical history, my grandparents' medical history, and not just medical history, but also life, right? So she wanted to know what happened in my past all the way back into three generations. And so over time, I've learned that it does play a really big role, whether we realize it or not, like what our parents and grandparents have gone through. And so at the end of this conversation, she said to me, "Wow, you have been through a lot." And that was the first time that I actually sat back and said, "Yeah, I think I have, haven't I?" So that's what ended up happening. And she said to me, "Terry, these things have happened, but you're basically, we need to put you into triage. You need to lose weight, right? And you need to do it successfully." And so the process began.
Mm. You did mention that you were abusing alcohol. Was that something that you looked at that time as well and tried to decide, does this have a place in my life? Because and I want to next I want to talk about the emotional eating part, because I think a lot of women deal with that. But when you're first deciding, okay, this is like one of the most important things the doctor is mentioning is I need to get my weight under control. What was that process, and what about the alcohol? Was that something that you looked at too?
So the alcohol was always a part of my life. It was the reason why my biological father and mother got divorced when I was 3, because he was definitively, most likely, I can't say for sure, cannot diagnose him, but an alcoholic with a very serious alcohol problem. And once I dived into this journey, I actually learned and understood that alcoholism is a genetic type of predisposition. So if you have 3 generations of alcoholics, true alcoholics, in your family tree, most likely it gets passed down or it skips a generation. It just depends. And so that aspect, that knowledge was always in my mind because I grew up being told I was going to become an alcoholic just like him. Anytime there was any alcohol involved, my mother would tell me I'm an alcoholic. And so I kind of always try to meter it out, but there was a period of a few years where I was out of control. And so the way it, and I always knew I would have a tendency to fall into that abyss essentially. And so I paid more attention to that than I did with the food, right? And so with the alcohol, what ends up happening is that, you start really innocently, right? So you had a rough day at work, you have a glass of wine, great. If you're not an alcoholic, if you don't have a predisposition to alcoholism, you could probably stop after one, right? But alcoholics cannot stop, right? And so eventually one glass turns into 2, 3, then that doesn't do the job. Then now we jump to, the vodka and other things. And then one glass of vodka is not enough. Now it's 2, then it's 3 because there's no effect. The body adapted. That's what alcoholism is. It's an allergy to ethanol. And so after and it takes a long time. It's not necessarily a very quick process, but after a while, I noticed that I would wake up in the morning. The first thought in my head was, do I have enough Grey Goose in the freezer for tonight? Right. And so I started noticing these thoughts creeping in, like I was thinking about it and I was like, whoa, 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 like hold up. We're going in a direction where we're not going to be able to come back. Right. And so I started pulling back essentially on the alcohol. But then what happened, if you can guess, is that I replaced the alcohol with jars of Nutella, pints and pints of Haagen-Dazs, because I wasn't addressing the root cause of why I wanted the alcohol in the first place, right? And so I started eating out of control, right? So, and it was never healthy food. I wasn't binging on broccoli, right? I was binging on all the things you could possibly imagine. And so the 80 pounds would just not come off.
We've talked about alcohol on my show a few times and had some really great guest experts, but it is so common that if you're not kind of dealing with that underlying issue or trauma or whatever it might be that's causing you to numb, and it's so easy to transfer. It's so easy to transfer to food too, because that's legal. You're not going to have a hangover from food. You can drive and binge, but it leads to so many other different problems, and you're not really dealing with that root cause, that is something that needs to be handled and looked at. So when you were dealing with, you've gone from like maybe too much alcohol or that obsession with alcohol to now you're overeating and you're emotional eating. After meeting with that doctor, how do you start to, deal with, I need to look at this problem that I'm having with food and the binging, and what do you do? How do you like really start to decide, well, how am I going to help myself with these situations? How am I going to help myself when I find myself binging?
It's so interesting because the mind is the most fascinating thing, right? And so when I went cold turkey with the alcohol, and I didn't realize, I had no clue. No one told, I mean, obviously I didn't get help. I didn't know that the sugar withdrawal paired with the alcohol withdrawal was going to send me in that direction, right? And I didn't think much of it. I didn't think I was eating emotionally. I had never heard of such a thing. Emotional eating was not part of my vocabulary. I had no awareness of it. And so what would end up happening is, when we are operating from an unconscious perspective, right? And there's a lot of things that we do that are part of our subconsciousness and consciousness. We tend to keep hitting a certain barrier, right? And so what would end up happening is I would start a diet and I would do really well for a period of time. And then I would just bump up against that thing like, oh man, and I would fall off the wagon, so to say, when the diet was over, right? So let's say I lost 40 pounds, diet is over, woohoo! I had a little mental party for myself, back to regular habits, right? And what were those? Oh, yes, all the things that actually had me gain all the weight. And so this cycle would keep repeating over and over again every single time. And so eventually, I like to call myself a professional dot connector because that's what I was trained to do, was troubleshoot machines and computers and things like that. That's my original degree. And eventually, finally, I started piecing it together. And I was like, wait a minute. Every diet, note that these diets, they don't work. And every time I do a diet successfully, I end up gaining more weight, and not just the weight that I lost, but also the weight, but even more than that, right? And so it started dawning on me like, well, okay, so maybe I need a different approach because dieting is not working. And when I say dieting, I mean, really restrictive eating, juice cleanses, intermittent fasting, keto, where, you go from one day swallowing an entire jar of Nutella to going down to 30 carbs a day. I mean, imagine what your body experiences in that process, right? But you white knuckle it for like a certain amount of time until you get to a particular result, and then you can't white knuckle it anymore. You let go because the diet itself is not sustainable and maybe not the right choice for you. And so I did this over and over and over again for a few years until I finally realized that this is not working. I actually need help. I need to reach out to somebody. I need to get help. And at that time, I found a coach online that specialized in bodybuilding and physique and nutrition and macro based diets, right? So, not necessarily a diet, just a different combination of foods and how things are structured and balanced throughout the day. And that's when I realized that I have an emotional eating problem. Actually, my coach realized it. Why? Because the food plan that I was on was not restrictive. I had plenty of food to eat. It was just high volume food that was low in calories. So I felt full. I actually could not eat all the food that was in my meals for the day. It was that much food, and I was losing 7 pounds a month regularly. So everything was going really well. I was not hungry physically, and I was losing weight. But then 6 to 7 months into it, I completely just had a blackout, right? And I would start binging again. And so it wasn't necessarily the fact that I was food deprived. I wasn't starved. I wasn't doing an unsustainable diet. It was actually very sustainable. I just had a problem, right? And so that's when things started becoming a lot more clear that that was the issue.
Oh, that's so interesting. It's so back to like, what you were saying, how you were starting to just chronically diet. It's so funny now that I look back because did the same thing for a while, for a long while. And to think, oh, wait, so I'm going to fully restrict. I'm going to be starving because most of the diets are just so under calorie that what you actually need. And then I'm going to be done. You're done like at 6 weeks or whatever, and then you go back to eating like normal, and then what a surprise, it's come back. Like, it's illogical to think that diets will work, but this new one, this will work, or you have this event that's coming up, and so you just need to get to this weight by that point. But that cycle is it's not great for your body. It's not sustainable, like you said. And so finding something that is going to actually be able to, you're going to stick with, is so important. But then having to deal with, okay, these issues are coming up. It's been 6 or 7 months, and now you're like, I am finding myself in my old patterns. Is that where you really started to get into the mind and how to think about what you're doing and the reason why? And then it's not like you have the nice plan, you have the good workouts, but the mind piece, your brain is what needs some attention. Is that what you sort of started to turn to at that point?
Exactly, exactly. So just like if you were troubleshooting a machine, right? And you have a particular problem, so you start trying to fix it in different ways and you get all the parts right, and then it's still not working, right? So then you pinpoint where is the source of the problem. And the source of the problem for me was my feelings were not being satisfied, right? I was emotionally hungry, and that
Mhm.
was manifesting into eating particular foods that made me feel a certain way because I was looking to change my state of being for in that particular moment, whatever that may have been. And so what I started becoming aware of, and this is the most interesting, fascinating part, is that all of this was happening. I was completely unaware of it. I just knew that I had an urgent and binging and emotional eating is very interesting because it's very intense, right? And it's urgent. And there's really no logical explanation for why you need this thing at 2 a.m., right? Because you ate all your food, you're not hungry, you actually had too much food to eat. You could barely eat all your food that you had for the day. And so now the question is, well, why do you need that? What are you feeling in that moment when that urgency comes up? And so I started noticing these things. I worked with a therapist as well who explained to me, like, this is emotional hunger. And I started learning about primary foods versus secondary foods that humans consume. And primary foods are actually emotional food, right? So things like joy, love, happiness, there are all of the good type of energy feelings that we get to consume that are missing, right? So when we're missing those feelings, um, we tend to find ways to fulfill them with something else. Or, for example, if you're feeling grief and you want to change your state, a lot of people will grab a substance, whatever that may be, right? It could be a behavior as well. It could be sugar, salt, ice cream, cigarettes, alcohol. I mean, right? I'm making sense, right? And so
Mhm.
when you start to pay attention to when is the urge coming, when is the that kind of urgency present in your mind, and instead of automatically reaching for the thing that you've always reached towards, try to kind of embrace it. And something that I started telling myself in the process of this was, I would feel it, whatever it may be. In my case, it was loss. I would feel loss, grief. And so it was so consuming. It was so powerful. It was so unpleasant. It was so uncomfortable that I just wanted it to stop, right? And so the Nutella and the ice cream helped. But what I started doing is I would start talking to myself and I would say, I am here. I'm not going anywhere. We're going to get through this together. I am here for you. And so I kept saying that over and over and over again because I felt like that grieving part of me was actually a little child
Mm.
that never really was allowed to grieve. And so little by little, we got through it.
It's like shows you how really going back, like your doctor did, back 3 generations, and even going to therapy and figuring out this is a feeling of loss that I have. This is like it's like inner child work, dealing with something that has happened that you're feeling. And instead of going from like starting to feel the feeling and going straight to food, you're pausing and you're feeling it so that it can leave your body. And that the more you can do that, this I'm sure, and you can tell us, but the more you do that, the stronger that muscle becomes and you're able to do it easier. And if it's not perfect, that's okay. You're making progress. So is that something that you just kept practicing, and is that something that really helped you notice? Because like you said, we don't want to feel those uncomfortable feelings. So when we have a thought and we have a feeling, we're like, oh, this is unbearable, like whatever it is. Like you said, you mentioned a few of them. It could be shopping, it could be gambling, whatever, just something to take that feeling away. You just kept doing that, and it led to you being able to not lead to those behaviors anymore with the binging.
Yes. So over time, it wasn't overnight,
Yeah.
right? So, and there's a lot of slip ups as well that happen. And I just want to tell everybody that's listening to this, it's not a light switch. You don't just turn it on and off.
Right.
There will be moments where you're not going to catch it, right? There are going to be moments where you're not fully paying attention all the time, and it's going to happen. It doesn't mean that you have failed. It just means that it's just a slip up. So the next time, try to pay more attention before the urge comes, right? Is there maybe like a triggering event that takes place? Is there something that shows up in your life over and over again, right? So sometimes when we have experienced a really something really traumatic as when we're young, when that experience happens again as adults, we don't necessarily tie it right back to the original. We just experience it in a really dramatic way. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
very painful, but it may not necessarily be that in the current time. We just experience it over and over again as we would if we were a child. And so I started noticing that loss was a theme in my life. So losing people or being separated from people or um, for whatever reason, people passing away or whatever it may have been, that would trigger me and kind of put me in that state of grief. And so when I realized that, I said, okay, so if something similar happens, I should know I'm going to have this type of reaction. So let me proactively prepare myself and just be ready. And so what I started doing is instead of completely taking away the Nutella or completely taking away the ice cream or whatever it was, I started to substitute. I started to troubleshoot and say, okay, we can have the ice cream. And matter of fact, we're going to have even more ice cream volume wise than what the Haagen-Dazs point is. But we're going to do it this way, right? So we're going to make a protein ice cream with zero fat yogurt and a little bit of bananas, and it's going to taste amazing. It's going to feel just like ice cream, but it's going to be only 280 calories and you can eat the whole thing. And so I started kind of doing that with the little child that was grieving because I was like, well, I'm not going to take it away from you because I don't need to. I can figure out how to get you ice cream without having the 1,500 calorie price tag on it. You know what I mean? I'm
Mm-hmm.
resourceful. I am here, right? I am here. I'm not going to slam the door on you because you're grieving. I'm going to help you. And so little by little, I started doing that with a lot of different foods. So instead of Nutella, I would make a protein chocolate mousse cup, and a pretty big one too you can have for 300 calories. And so little by little, I started doing that and replacing and substituting these trigger foods. And quite frankly, I mean, it's been over 6 years now. I don't have these cravings anymore.
That's amazing. And I love that you said, it wasn't like a light switch. This took time and practice. You have to like build that muscle. And I love that you're finding other options, because at the end of the day, you are working on your health. That's a priority to you. And you need to make sure that you're getting in the nutrition that you need. So, but without having to, take everything away. I love that. You were also telling me in that you were hitting perimenopause during all of this, which I'm sure adds a lot of fun things. Can you tell me, and also for people that you work with, but for you, is there other challenges that you felt you were kind of dealing with that were new at this time in your life and as you're entering your 40s?
So something I want to say about this is because I don't think it's talked about enough.
Hmm.
I started perimenopause at 37. I had no clue I was in perimenopause. Neither did anybody else. And so, in true oblivion fashion, because I just was not aware of these things, right? There wasn't any information or literature. Everything online or anything I've heard or read said that perimenopause starts in your 50s. So, all the symptoms that I had at 37, by 42, by the way, I was fully menopausal.
Hmm.
So, I have not seen a period now for 6 years. I'm 48 now. And so completely clueless. And I don't know if that was a good thing or a bad thing because and simultaneously, coincidentally, I had just started this journey, right? And so I would have these crazy hot flashes in the middle of meetings and, all these symptoms were happening to me like the fast and the furious, okay? And they were just coming at me in every direction. But I was simultaneously changing my diet and going to the gym and doing resistance training. So, for whatever reason, my ignorance was probably a good thing because I would go into a hot flash and I would think, oh, wow, my body's burning fat. I had no idea.
Oh my gosh.
And so I want to tell women that there are a lot of symptoms, and a lot of women actually start perimenopause. I'm not an exception. This is not unique in their mid 30s. And that's not something that's talked about a lot, and women don't know that. And so I want to address that because I feel like so many things could make sense, a lot more sense in our late 30s if we look at it from that perspective, like our hormones are beginning the transitionary period. And so some women go through it really quickly and other women don't. Everybody's really different. But if you are experiencing interesting things like that, I would strongly invite you to kind of look into that aspect, even if you feel you're too young.
I'm glad you said that. It's funny. I don't know if I would have known as much as I know about perimenopause. I can say I wouldn't if it wasn't for me having this podcast and having guests come on. And I think there's more awareness about it now, but I would never have thought that that could be possible in your mid 30s. And there are so many symptoms that we have to deal with as women that I had no idea were related to perimenopause. And it blows my mind because a lot of times we're just thinking, are we crazy? Is it just, am I the only one? I mean, is this just because I'm a mom and I'm pulled in many directions and I'm tired? Like, there's so many times where I've been like, am I the only one? And no, I'm not the only one. You said that you're glad to get this conversation going because I think it's so great to have awareness and also oh wow, this is why this is happening. What else do you think women should know? I've had so many people. I had a friend the other day that she's like, my period has changed so much, and I'm so tired. And she was saying, she was just giving me all these perimenopause symptoms, and but she wasn't getting really any help from her doctor with that. So is there anything else that they should know about if they're experiencing something like this and or in that age range at all?
Oh, 100%. I mean, there's a lot of really interesting aspects to perimenopause, and everybody's really different, right? So everybody's symptoms are very unique. Their combination of symptoms are really unique. I mean, if you think about it, everybody's hormones are completely unique to them. But something to keep in mind is if you notice things are different or changing based on your own benchmark, right? So your period is changing. It's not regular. It looks different. You feel differently. Things are just not the way that they used to be. And it happens very gradually. So sometimes it's hard to even realize that that's what's going on. But one of the best things that you can do for yourself in that phase is to start looking at your nutrition, to start looking at your lifestyle, to start looking at your stress level, right? Because if you think about it like this is Your body goes through three really stressful phases as women: your adolescence, pregnancies, if you get pregnant, and menopause. The first, the first and the last, we're not avoiding that. There's no way to skip over those two, right? And so your body is in a stressful condition already internally. So looking at your stress level, looking at your obligations outside of, in your life in general, your work schedule, things like that, giving yourself some space to process and to observe and to breathe and to have a better regulated nervous system helps. Going to the gym, lifting weights, I cannot recommend that anymore, because doing that for yourself is going to ensure that at least some of the symptoms that you may or may not experience, again, depends on the individual, could be a lot less dramatic, right? Eating the right nutrition, eating enough protein, giving your body the fuel it needs to go through this stressful period, supporting yourself emotionally and mentally in all the ways, I think is, I mean, it's priceless, really.
I love that. I think that, as someone who does prioritize my protein and my strength training, I know sometimes it doesn't feel like easy to do. And I can see why some people are like, I don't want to do that. I don't have time for that. But you're giving yourself such a gift. If you can utilize things in a healthy lifestyle that are going to actually help your process of going through this, which can be so hard. And I honestly think I might have more symptoms if I wasn't doing some of the things that I'm doing to alleviate just this transition, this process. And also the way I look at it, this is the age where we're losing muscle. So to be able to prioritize the strength training, I mean, what are some other reasons you tell your clients get in there and do some strength training?
Well, having muscle mass actually regulates a lot of parts of your body, right? And there's a really fantastic book, I cannot recommend it enough, by Peter Attia, called Outlive. It talks about how resistance training and muscle mass actually is tied, directly connected to whether or how people develop cardiovascular disease, neurodegenerative diseases, metabolic diseases, and cancer, right? So having lean muscle tissue with a lower percentage of body fat is beneficial to your health in so many ways that they're just now starting to have enough research to support all the ways, right? So not just metabolically, hormonally, it helps with your neurodegenerative state of health. It helps with your mobility, your stability, your joints, your bones. I mean, I could go on and on and on.
Yeah, I mean, it's so important. And I think a lot of, and this is just from people that I've spoken to, have the feedback I've gotten from them, but they think it has to be more complicated than it is as far as your strength training. So when you have somebody who's like brand new, I have not been strength training, I don't even, maybe I do walking or something. What do you tell them to start with? Is it something that you could do at home, or like, what are your tips for like a newbie?
So, somebody that's just starting out, I cannot recommend to you enough that getting even just one session with a trainer, whether they show you how to use the equipment at the gym, or whether you get a consultation with someone that knows what they're doing and how to program your workouts, it is worth it, right? And so having someone really evaluate where you're at in your current fitness journey and your health journey and provide something that's customized to you, I think is really important. So now, and it doesn't have to be something expensive or long term, but just to get you going in the right direction, right? If I hadn't done that, I'd probably still be stumbling around, fumbling in the dark, not knowing what the heck I'm doing. And that's frustrating, right? And you
Yeah.
quit. And so that would be step number one, is ask somebody to help you that has a good track record, that has helped women in your situation in the past. Number two, if I were to take a case study of someone who has never worked out a day in their life, they have not done cardio ever, maybe long time ago, but not anytime recently, and they need to lose body fat, right? So the program that I would recommend is to start with body weight exercises that are in the squat realm, right? So RDLs, maybe with small weights, but a lot of body weight and maybe some hand weights for upper body. And just have a really structured program where you're doing lower legs, lower body, maybe twice a week, and upper body, maybe once a week or twice a week. On top of that, if they don't have any mobility issues or any joint issues or any reason why it would prevent them from doing a little bit of cardio, I would not necessarily give a lot of cardio. So, and nothing that's high impact. So maybe an elliptical for 15 minutes per day, right? Start there. And then include about 5 to 6,000 steps per day. So wear a tracker on your hand and just make sure you get those steps outside of the cardio time, right? So the steps you get during cardio don't count towards your total number of steps. And so that's where I would generally start and see how the person feels, right? So get into this routine of just getting 10 minutes of cardio, 5,000 steps, and maybe 3 times training at home, body weight and hand weights, maybe some resistance bands if you're feeling ambitious, right? And just that alone, if you do that consistently, you will see results. Now, pair that, you're just going to feel better, right? Now, pair that with a macro nutrition plan, and you're going to be like a rocket taking off in a successful direction.
Yeah, you feel better. I love talking to people about this because, especially with the strength training, because what you outlined isn't crazy. It doesn't have to be so extreme. I think people think if I'm not doing it if I'm not going to the gym for 2 hours, 5 days a week, then it's not good enough. And then they end up failing. It's like they can't do it. They set these outrageous goals, can't accomplish it, and then it just feels defeating and they give up. So I love starting small. You can always add to it. You can always build from there and get higher weights and all of those things too. And that's I can get most of my workouts done at home in 30 minutes. It's like, it's not that long. It's really easy to do. And then you start to pair, oh, wow, like I feel so good after I work out. Like I love the different hormones that are released after you worked out and how it just is such a great stress reliever, especially because we've been in a state of stress, and we're at this, especially going into perimenopause, our body is in stress. So having that as an outlet for that is like, there's nothing that works better than lifting my mood than a workout that I've tried. So, and there's no negative consequences. And I really like the suggestion for a trainer, meeting with a trainer. I feel like it's a little bit easier to get injured as we get older as well. So, preventing that by making sure you're doing the right form and having the correct usage of the equipment is like so important. I think that another thing I wanted to ask you about, as far as like with the hormones, you said this can really help with hormones, like having more muscle and our nutrition. Is there anything else that you have found for yourself or for your clients that helped with your hormones and just like balancing them out a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily know how to balance hormones because in order to balance them chemically, you would have to know the benchmark of what they used to be. And so I have no idea how to balance hormones because if you think about it, to balance the hormones, you would have to know where you were at. And every person is really different.
Right.
And so the way that I look at it is, well, how do you feel, right? How do you feel on a daily basis? What is your state of being? Like, do you have energy? Do you have motivation? Do you feel optimistic? And a lot of those things can be managed through resistance training and moving your body and eating the right foods, etc. But some of the things that have helped tremendously, as far as how you're feeling when your hormones are in fluctuation, is because a lot of times you feel anxiety. People feel anxiety during perimenopause or depression or, very heavy feelings that kind of keep them from taking on new things or new activities. And so things like meditation, right? Things like yoga, things like Pilates, a lot of times, any type of practice that helps you regulate your nervous system, because the nervous system knows there's stress going on in the body. A lot of times it could trigger you into a lot of stressful type of feelings. And so doing anything that reduces stress in general, I have found that to be very helpful. And so looking at some of your boundaries in and around life and work, looking at how many tasks you're taking on a daily basis, right? How many commitments do you have um, in your life in general that you keep saying yes to, and just pulling back maybe in this transitionary period so that you can kind of calm down your nervous system, calm down all of the things that are going on inside of you a little bit.
I didn't know that anxiety and depression were symptoms of perimenopause until recently, and that was like a big aha moment for me because I hear a lot of women say that that's increased, and then again it's like, is this because the kids are going into high school or college, or you try to think of why am I feeling like this, but sometimes it's just because this is the state of our hormones and there's these symptoms that are coming up. And I want to talk about your retreats because since you mentioned like the meditation and the yoga, I know that's a component in your retreats that you do. So, can you share a little bit about what you do with your retreats and what it looks like to go on a retreat with you?
Yeah, it's my love project. This is absolutely my love child, as I call it. And so what the retreats include is morning yoga every day with meditation, strength training, lunch, dinner, breakfast, a hike out in nature. Sometimes we go and swim in waterfalls, which is really cool. And the community, right? So they're not large retreats. The maximum group is about 10 people. So it's a very intimate type of experience where you get to spend 4 or 5 days with a group of women that are the same age as you, going through the same things, and share your life essentially with people that you may or may not ever see again, right? So you don't have to put on a mask. You don't have to be somebody else. You can fully show up as yourself and show up and support other women as well going through similar things. And so what ends up happening is it's a very magical experience because a lot of women end up being friends, and they end up meeting each other again and going on other trips and just doing things together, which a lot of us in midlife start losing friendships, right? We start getting more isolated, which is another type of thing that does not help when you're in peri and full menopause. And so I absolutely adore all of the women that come to the retreats. A lot of them have become clients of mine in terms of ongoing coaching, and the results are just incredible. I mean, you got to be a badass during perimenopause, okay? You got to take care of yourself.
I love it. I love the community aspect of a retreat and how you really bond with these women. And because the guard is down and you can just be yourself and authentic and all of the things that you mentioned, that's like my favorite things. I love hiking and being in nature, and that alone is just so good for your nervous system. So, if you could tell us where everyone can find you and learn more about the retreats and your coaching, that would be fabulous.
Yes, find me on thehouseofrose.com. That's the website. You can email me at Terry, Terry, at thehouseofrose.com. If you guys are interested in getting a guide on how to figure out your macros, you can email me and just put Jess in the subject line, and I will send you that guide. And then you can also find me on Instagram, How Good Can It Get? We actually have a group coaching that is open this summer for anybody that's interested in working through their strength training and their nutrition plan. And yeah, and interested to join the group of ladies that are currently in the group.
That is awesome. It's so important. This is the time where we need to be getting healthy and feeling our best and
being able to handle all the things that we're going through. So thank you so much, Terry, for being here and sharing everything with us. It's been awesome.
Thank you, Jess. I really appreciate it. Keep up the good work.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode. Please subscribe and review so we can reach more people who want to learn to glow alongside us. See you next time.